try it and see how it goes.
I wanted to thank you all for remaining here with us. And I wanted to bring the panel to your attention and give them the space to talk about their perceptions of the film, their experiences for Tata Daniel in making the film, but also how Native American communities, right, are seeing through our eyes their own experiences here in this land. So I want to share the space with you all.
Maybe I just want to start. Can you hear me all? You hear me well? Okay.
Not really. Use the microphone.
I have one.
Oh, you have. Oh.
Sorry. But maybe, can you put it?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
All right. She's working on it, Lucy. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sticking around. I want to thank Red Nation to bring in this beautiful handkerchief and make us feel home with these colors. Also, I want to thank Petuuche for being here. As you know, I'm very proud of this film because this film was truly an independent effort, and Petuuche became a real supportive in this, and so we gave him the credits of associate producer. This film was made with very little money. It was a whole struggle to do it. It was made on recycled material, and it's a little fragile now. We trying to preserve it because I think it is in fact the first testimony that came out of after the PISA court in El Salvador. Hardly perhaps 10 years into the PISA court, we started researching and making this film. At that time, we were making this film. We have to keep it secret. And this is for a couple of years, we didn't mention to anybody we were doing the film because the fear that is addressed here in the film is still very present in our psyche, specifically in this village of Izalco, where the killing took place mostly in the lapses of, I say, 2 months. And so we keep it secret for a lot of people. And at the very last moment, we made it public that we were making this film. And it's still the fear that is injected through the mass killing still carry on to this very day. In fact, right now we're doing a congress on the colonization, and we're still running through the same kind of fear. Although the political has changed, but the present government is, Violet explained to you early on, there is a law now, a very repressive law, which the human rights are being violated. And so the conditions to do anything in El Salvador continue to be a struggle. So when we made this film, it was not only that we have to deal with fear and all those, all the legacies of a post-war reality, but we have to deal with financing the film and creating the film. The film practically took 6 years, 9 years in the making. So it was a long research. Don Juan Ama, of course, was about at that time close to 94 years old. And he had the courage to speak openly about 1932, and perhaps the only survivor who at that time, after the post-war reality, has the courage to talk about it. In fact, he is the one who asked me to make the film. And so I I never had an idea that was I going to make up this film, but he insisted. And he told me, because I visited him for spiritual reasons, never for making a book or making anything. So I saw through the years, every time I visit him, people from all over the world actually came. There were people from Germany, scholars from the USA, students from the National University. It was a parade of people coming because he was very well known spiritual man and his own sort, but also he was one of the very few survivals and direct descent to Chief Jose Feliciano Ama. So he became some kind of fairly well-known person among certain circles, academic circles mostly, and intellectual circles, because the history of the Ama family. So at one point he said, listen, I'm tired to repeat this story. Tell it to you for the last time. And I say, Don Juan, what do you want me to do with this story? And I say, I don't know, but I'm just going to tell it to you, and this is the last time I'm going to tell this story. So this film, to me, it has that. Also, it has the legacy of a testimony of a survival. So I cherish and I protect it, because I think at one point we're going to need it if we would do a tribunal for reconciliation and truth. And this is a challenge I want to pose to these two schools who are responsible for this show here, the Tufts University and UNM, to see if we can create a tribunal about truth and reconciliation. Please take that into consideration. Artist called against USA intervention. The spirit of Artist Call behind the Artist Call was always 1932. In fact, we did the opening, remember, Lucy, in a cold January 22nd in New York City. That was when we burst the bubble of Artist Call, right in the middle of Broadway. And we took over West Broadway, and we call it the true Avenue of the Americas. Lucy can tell about it. It's a beautiful story. But so the legacy of combining those realities of resistance abroad and back home is something that I think it has to come through a tribunal where intellectuals, academicians, indigenous peoples engage in a true dialogue for reconciliation and truth. So please do consider that, Tufts University and people from UNM, and hope we can sit down at one point and talk more about that. I will leave it here. Maybe somebody wants to continue. Petuuche?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure much of what I can say in the making of the film, or even of showing it. At one point in time, Daniel provided me this T-shirt of Don Felicio Ama. So I told him, I says, well, I'm going to wear this tomorrow. And I remember. Let me see, at the National Museum of the American Indian in Manhattan some years back. And post-film showing and the discussion we had, I talked a little bit about connecting the story of the killing of indigenous peoples in 1932. And we have the two indigenous peoples here in New Mexico now, called New Mexico, by the Spanish conquistadors. And I told a story about how our village at Acoma was burned and destroyed, and people imprisoned for the killings of Spanish soldiers. So that's the kind of story, again, I think that really should be perpetuated, really needs to, again, be broadcasted so that we can talk about the genocide that has occurred amongst and to indigenous peoples, and what is the meaning of it into our future, and how can we account for that, and what do both the perpetrators and the survivors, can do and should do in telling their factual history of the United States. And as I go into it, I just want to talk more about how this has then been described in the academic circles and the books that are coming about. So this I just want to get into right now, and then we can probably talk more as we move forward in discussions or the questions that Violet is asking.
Hello, my name is Justine Teba. I'm from the Pubs of San Clair, Tsuki Acoma. I'm with the Red Nation and Red Nation. Okay, sorry. I just want to say thank you for having me here and for having me part of this discussion. Yesterday, we had a roundtable discussion between myself, Daniel, Petuuche, Maurice Chino was there, our Palestinian brother up there was there, and Jem Marley, who's also in the Red Nation, and Cheyenne Antonio. And we had a conversation centered on decolonization and solidarity with the Global South and across the world, and what it really means to decolonize and why we're put in this position in the first place. And I just think, first of all, that was a very powerful film, an amazing film, and I really learned a lot from it and really gained such a perspective that really just like makes it all the more important to me about what solidarity is and means, and really, like, we're connected in our struggles throughout the world as colonized peoples, and ultimately it's the struggle for land and the struggle to live with dignity and in abundance, and that's why I'm in the Red Nation, so that I have a place in these like movement building to build that project of decolonization. And I just having the discussion yesterday, which we'll publish on our podcast, by the way, will be available. It just really recenters me and really, I guess, like refocuses me on the mission. We're not the only ones struggling we're in our struggles together. So just thank you for sharing me this, talking the last 2 days.
Like to ask you all if you could comment on, from your perspectives of understanding the land and its sacred meanings, why is there a need for land struggle, and what does decolonization mean when it comes to the land struggle? What does that mean that we want our land back?
Let me comment on the importance of land to indigenous peoples, and even to society that wanted the land. And someone once remarked, it always has been about land. Or like my people, we're already underneath the land. And it's like, eventually you'll die and go back to the land. That really is the foundation of our existence, and is protecting that area there, and expecting that our ancestors who are buried there are going to help us spiritually in remaining upon that land. And within that land and on that land is both our past and our present and our future. And the essence of maintaining it is critical to our existence. We know that all of America once was still under the domain of indigenous peoples. Today, you know, much of it is private land, maybe most of it, and public lands. So that I think our struggle is then, yeah, we want to remain on our own homelands and have that protected and respected. But we also say that the public lands, you know, are really within, should be within our traditional cultural properties. That even though they may be national monuments or national parks, etc., or state lands, we are still connected to those lands, and that's our insistence that so much of those sacred sites be protected, or that our environmental and cultural concerns for what is now public lands and private lands.
So over the last 2 days, our conversations that we've been having together have been really centered on like what it means to exist as an Indigenous person. And ultimately, that's really our relation to the land, and not just our relation, but also like where our stance is in the project of settler colonization, which is what makes us Indigenous, because being Indigenous is a political it's a political title that we hold because we are subjected to the process of settler colonization, which is a process where settlers colonize the land to become the new Indigenous people, to gain control over the land. And so, you know, in the process of decolonization and land back, that's what that ultimately means, is to reverse that project and reinstate the land back to the people. And that's what I really appreciate about this film, because they really, you really get a sense of like what they're fighting for, which is always the land, the communal land, the access to land, access to your ancestral lands, and your relation to the land. And that's how I see like what land. Oh wait, let me before I go into that. What I also appreciate in the film is like the spirituality of it and the importance of that in it, because I think that's what that means when we say that like land is sacred, because it's really like our higher relation that we all have as humans, but having that intimate relation like with the land itself. And that's really I think what it means to have like a true relation to the land, because there's also like a spiritual meaning and sacred meaning that comes with it all, because like we have known these lands for millennia through our generations upon generations of ancestors who lived in the same place, who come to know the same place, who we developed our humanity from, and all that takes care of us comes from this place, or from where we are all from. And so like ultimately land back as like a pathway to decolonization is really just a reinstatement of that relation, and really just recreating a balance, and also like material physical reparations for colonization. It's all in the land, and that's what this film really shows, is that people died for their land. People sacrificed their entire lives to try to get their land back. And I just really feel for Jose Alma, who died for his land and died fighting for that mission, and really giving that ultimate sacrifice of dying for his people and the land. So really it all ties into like the project of settler colonization and the greater project of imperialism that disallows peoples from having access to their own lands.
Yeah, indeed. Can you hear me? Yeah. you know, the whole issue about communal land, that area of the Western Territory of the Nahuatl tribe, it was always in question because during the colonial times, the Spaniards discovered that this land and Western Territory was rich in cacao. And the cultivation of cacao was some way a technology that the Spaniards didn't realize first of all, what kind of fruit was that, and how to harvest it and how to make it into chocolate. And Nahuatl people and indigenous people in the region knew all this all along. Remember that we were drinking cacao 15,000 years ago. So this drink not only is sacred, but it is a legacy of the relationship between the tenure of land and the property that later on became the Spaniards trying to take away. During that relationship, the economic relationship, they respected the land, they respected the cultivation of cacao. But when the problem really came to take place is by the foundation of the Republic. The Republic has been the most damaging obstacle for indigenous peoples because it's the Republic who later on claimed those very same lands and start to distribute it for coffee growers and took away the communal land for indigenous people who have administrated wisely to different kind of crops. So when we talk about land, we have to also talk not only about colonization, but also about the foundation of the republics. Because I believe that with the creation of the republics is when the most damaging thing has happened to, not to say that the colonizers didn't see land as a profit, but as indigenous people, we have that relationship to land from time immemorial. And in this particular area of Izalco, when they create La Alcaldía, which he prefers, Don Juan refers as La Alcaldía del Común, which is some kind of a government. The Alcaldía del Común not only administrates the communal land, which was vast regions, but also administrate the water. The water irrigation for this land is important. And they administrate all this. So there was a form of government tied to the land. And no, it was not reversed. So I think that land is, and communal lands in Central America, it has a very strong relation to the Republic, but also to the new colonization. Remember that in the 1950s, the Chiquita banana was, and I just recently learned this, that who sits in the board of directors of Chiquita banana, who had the largest plantation in Guatemala and Honduras, was a State Department person and a CIA person who were sitting on the board of directors of Chiquita banana. So that can tell you how dominant culture see the relationship of land and how they try to take away from the indigenous people because that is what they want to dominate, the land. And the land has been from here on and from the foundation of El Salvador Republic, it's been one of the biggest issues. And we still continue to struggle with land because mostly people wouldn't have land. As it is today, in the same region where I shot the film, we still don't own, very little people owns a plot of land. Hardly anybody owns any flat land. We don't even have a communal house where to meet. So this has been affects every level of our existence, the stolen of communal lands.
But let me say one final thing about land. When I talk about I see Indigenous people's demand and right for ownerships of their lost lands, I think as Indigenous peoples, we understand the realities of the political dynamics and situation of land and land rights. Yes, treaties like the Treaty of Ruby Valley or the Fort Laramie Treaty affecting the Sioux Nations, the Black Hills. In the Indigenous peoples there, the Sioux still want the Black Hills back rather than money. But generally, I think Indigenous peoples are not seeking all of the American lands back in their possession, but they want what's in the treaties. They also want to have their current lands respected. Even like at home, here in New Mexico, where much of our land was given up by the Spaniards to themselves as land grants. We respect those areas today. We respect our neighbors, the land acequias, the land grants that are right next to Acoma. We respect that. And we just expect that they'll also respect our lands, territories, and natural resources that we now control on our own lands. And we expect the state government and the United States government really to, again, respect the sovereignty and self-determination of us on the lands that we are now on.
I think I want to ask you a little bit, since you touched on sovereignty and self-determination, which are very important pillars for our existence, right? I wanted to talk to you about linking sovereignty, including intellectual sovereignty, self-determination, and the right to a political agenda. Can you link that to land and water struggles today and how decolonizing can make a difference with regards to protecting the planet, since we are in an age of planetary crisis and global catastrophe that is affecting millions of people around the world, producing refugees that have to leave their homelands because the weather, there's drought or famine, there's no, food. There's, on top of war, there's that weather changing, right? The patterns we are seeing in Puerto Rico, recently Florida, Jackson, Mississippi, that is affecting also Black communities as much as it is affecting Indigenous communities. So I'd let you comment.
So the Red Nation perspective has always, how do I put it? We're pro-Indigenous, and to be pro-Indigenous, you have to actually, there's a lot of things that need to happen because we are still suffering from our own genocide. It never stopped. It's still ongoing. And what I was thinking about when you're asking your question is the projects of plurinationalism, which is why the Red Nation looks to the global South when we're looking to what we're actually going to do for a successful project of decolonization. And really what that means is, like creating a plurinationalist state like in Bolivia, where you have tribes at the government level for the first time deciding what to do with their government, what to do with their resources and land and resources and whatnot. And I see that as a project that can happen like within the United States, because we have hundreds of tribes that would have a seat of power and a say-so at the government level to decide what to do in places like Jackson or Flint or wherever it's all happening. I mean, we're all suffering in the United States. It doesn't matter if you're Indigenous or not. We live inside of the belly of the beast. The United States is the most imperialist, like greatest imperial power to have ever existed in, human history, really. They have 800 military bases across the world. The majority of all government spending goes to projects of militarization and occupation. And it's all in the hands of the United States government. And what would happen if we gave a government power, or if we took away some of that power from the single force and actually distributed that power to the hundreds of tribes that exist inside the United States? And that, doing that alone would be like part of a plurinationalist project where we're actually like empowering sovereign nations to do to protect the land, to do the things that we got to do just to live a dignified life. And I actually want to bring up the Red Deal while I'm talking about this, which is a book that the Red Nation, members of the Red Nation wrote. And really, it's a plan for decolonization, divest from occupation, divest from the U.S. military, abolish policing, occupation, just divesting our tax dollars from what creates the occupation across the world. And so, and then reinvesting in our common humanity and common future, and reinvesting in the earth. So, one of the things we say is like, could you imagine if, what if instead the U.S. government had to hold a bake sale to make their next bomb instead of children for their education, So thinking about it like that, we have physical money that we can redirect into our people, but while simultaneously ending like militarization and occupation. And we got those ideas from looking at, how the Global South is handling it, how they're, building ways for what is really a socialist future. Because, another thing that we say in the Red Nation is you can't be against something. We can always be against genocide. We can always be against massacres and capitalism and all those things, but we actually have to be for something. So being for, and so that's why, our primary political ideology is revolutionary socialism, because we recognize that this is, it's going to take revolution to achieve these things. And, we see socialism as the means of a just transition into that decolonial future.
Yeah, I want to take the essence and importance of sovereignty and self-determination for Indigenous peoples. When I remember we were at the World Conference on Racism in Durban, South Africa. I can't remember the years, 10 years ago, even more. And the nation states, or their refusal to recognize us as people, and in its plural, peoples, and even the World Conference itself, had the usage of the term xenophobia. That nation states, especially I think that the conquering powers that came over Asian America set this xenophobic fear of Indigenous peoples over this essence and quest for sovereignty and self-determination that they took away. And that still exists today, this fear of Indigenous peoples being sovereign and self-determining. And if there's going to be any form of realistic reparations, it really should be that, and not so much as, I suppose, as any kind of monetary compensation over what happened to indigenous peoples, but really is allowing indigenous peoples to be sovereign and self-determined. And let me just make one more point of its essence. When we worked on the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that word sovereignty was never used by us that participated in it over 20 years. Because it was such a powerful term. And even when the United Nations Permanent Forum was being discussed, and we were, of course, supporting it, the term we were using for the Permanent Forum was the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples. That it come to be, it is now titled as the United Nations Forum on Indigenous Issues. So again, that's again how this domination and the resistance in recognizing our sovereign rights and self-determining rights to be who we are as indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I think the question should be framed, in my view, are we as indigenous people are allowed to be sovereign and in practice self-determination? I think this is to me, that's the question that we should be addressing as well. I think, for instance, right now in El Salvador, are you okay, sister?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you felt for a minute. We're trying to put together a Congress, Indigenous Congress of Decolonization. And we have used a term of autoconvocarse. ¿Cómo se dice autoconvocarse?
Auto-convocation. Self-convocation.
Self-convocation, you use that word in English? No. It's a way of we call ourselves to meet. We are not asking anybody to invite us. We self-organize or self. Yeah, it's a form of self-determination by insisting that as indigenous peoples, we invite to each other. We don't expect anybody to invite us to the table. We invite ourselves to the table. The way these past 2 days we've been doing. So to talk about those issues. And so I think this is a way to exercise some autonomy and our decisions and a way of reorganizing ourselves. Because in El Salvador, for instance, every time the government calls on indigenous peoples, everybody goes because it's in a hotel, because you're going to have nice coffee and probably a donut or whatever. Everybody goes. And we've been saying, stop going to the calls because those calls are manipulative and don't respond really to our own agenda. So the struggle has been, how can we create our own agenda? And now with this, organizing this Congress, it is one of the issues we've been addressing in terms of invite ourselves, to the table and invite our brothers and sisters to the table so we can start addressing issues and creating our own agenda. Specifically in countries like El Salvador, where indigenous people have been denied their existence legally or not legally, through massacres, through laws, etc., we have no sense of determination. We lost that. So now we start to call upon ourselves to start practice. it is curious that during the war, during the revolution war, the guerrilla stopped using the word self-determination. At the very initial of the struggle, they used the word self-determination. But then when the war picked up, they create these liberated zones, they call it. Territories that were controlled by the guerrilla. You cannot get in or get out without the guerrilla's permission. So they start calling some kind of liberation zones, but the self-determination was dropped off of the lexicon. It was no longer be used. When they signed the peace accord, the self-determination and autonomy was completed non-existence. So political parties and political interests is not up to them to decide indigenous people's self-determination. We have to take it on our own. We're not asking permission to anybody. Yeah, question.
No, I didn't even know. Thank you, Daniel, so much for sharing your film and the exhibition. And thank you so much to Red Nation and the work you've done. Take this off so you can hear me. I've learned so much through your podcast and your work and your advocacy. So thank you. I was just curious, Daniel, could you talk a little bit about the reception of the film in El Salvador? Did you show it in Izalco? Did you what has that been like?
It's been conflicting in one word. When we finished the film, initially, that was barely 10 years after the peace accords. The guerrilleros were very much all around in San Salvador and trying to figure out themselves how to participate in social activities and so on and so forth. But also they had become a legal party now by then. But I remember one day a friend of mine put together a get-together in a house of somebody. And there were quite a few commandantes of the guerrilla forces. They came and to the reception. And we were talking about showing the film. And they would keep sending me to this town somewhere in eastern part of the country, which is a tourist trap. And I didn't know why they were sending me there. And I end up getting into a little argument with this guy because I don't know what he thinks about indigenous people. You know, we just ended a war. And indigenous people was never in the agenda of the revolutionary forces. Furthermore, not in the agenda of the FMLN. So this guy keeps saying, you should go to this town. This town is welcome tourists. It looks like us as tourists, a tourist attraction. And I found that offensive. Now, the host was another man. The host is a lawyer. She is a lawyer. I suppose she's still alive. And when I finally told them that I'm going to go back to the town where I shot the film and show it right there, and I told them, and you can welcome to come. And the host told me, you know, I'm not going to go to that town and sit next to a brujo, meaning a witch, because this town is well known because indigenous people's spiritual practice. And they call it brujo, witchcrafting. And practically she said that to me. This is the intellectuals where I sort of begin to approach right after I finished the film. Nobody wanted to shoot, of course. And the Minister of Culture at that time And one particular, and I went back to the town where I shot the film, and I say, we're going to screen film it. And we're going to invite the whole family, Ama. So the town will have a reason to be scared once again. And we did show the film, but now we have problems because the Minister of Culture threat their agency in each town. We have a Casa de Cultura, which is a small little venue for the Minister of Culture to do folklore and to do whatever they do. They think it's culture. And the Casa de Cultura, the house, this little house, I asked them to lend me 200 seats, chairs, plastic chairs, so people can sit down because the screening of the film was going to be in an open space. And the day was coming, we're going to show the film, the invitation was sent, but we need the chairs. And the woman disappeared, completely disappeared. She wouldn't respond my calls. She wouldn't say anything. Finally, I reached to her and she said, crying at the phone, "Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry I've been out of the loop," or something in that regards. And I said, "What's going on, Iris? What happened? Tell me what happened." He said, "The Vice Minister of Culture called me and told me if I collaborate with you, they're going to dismiss me from work." So they threat people not to show the film because 1932 is still very much a hot issue. And so it's been a struggle to show the film back home. Finally, we did. What was interesting is that when we screened the film and they opened in Salpo, close to 300 people showed. People were eager to see the film. And we did purposely, we invite, diplomats, because we want to cover our backs just in case. And we invite it's called Nuncio Apostolico, that's the Vatican embassy in San Salvador, which is a big deal. So the representative of the Vatican came to see the film. And the people in that town is very religious. So when I saw him and they went to him and greeting him, they were very impressed. They have never seen so many cars. It was like 100 cars in them. So that gave me the assurance that people want to see this film and want to relate to what happened in 1932, but there's no venues for it. So that's more or less some of the experiences I had. Yeah.
So we have time for one more question or some closing remarks.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time.
I had a question. It's the fear among the powerful people who have power that there will be another demand to return to communal lands, and it's the fear among people who are indigenous, who are part of that community, then there will be another map. Is that what I understand?
That was part of it, yes.
And in Izalco, is it the town still divided between people who consider themselves indigenous and people who are not?
Yes.
Okay, so they still fear the townspeople.
I related to South Africa experiences of township.
Okay.
The township are the wealthy mixed-blooded who have control of the town,
Mhm.
and the indigenous live around the town. So when Jose Feliciano was taken prison, they prominent him in town. And one way to take his indigeneity was to dress up him as a Ladino, a mixed blood. So this is why they put the tie on. And they parade him with the tie, dressed up as a Latino, right? And where they were parading him, they were beating him up. So he died by being beat up by the mob of the township. So the township is the one who set the rules and in control. To this very day, indigenous people from La Alcaldía del Común, they don't go into some of the owners of these houses in town because they think and they believe there are private communal cemeteries inside of those houses. So they don't want to go into those houses. And it's probably true because the houses in the town, which are run by these mestizos, they're large haciendas, you know, and have land between the board, the properties. So they, indigenous people think that people bury in those homes too. So the relationship between the town people and the indigenous people is still to this very day, a friction, a lot of friction. Now, consider this, that Izalco has been a symbol of resistance, but also a symbol of resistance for the right. Because the right-wing political party, Arena, used to come to Izalco to inaugurate the campaign, political campaign for presidential elections, and they used to come into town. And the hymn of this political party, they sing the hymn because they say, here is where the communists lay. So, meaning the Izalco is the very ground for the communists. So they come back year after year to sing that hymn, that patriotic, that political hymn, and that. So the fear continued to be implemented on people, not only that this is the burial ground of the communists, but also if you dare to raise, you're going to end up the same way. So this is the fear related to the governments. Good to see you. I don't know if you guys are close.
Actually, I'm not sure what to say right now. I'm like, how do I close? I guess I could just close by saying thank you for opening this space and bringing up this conversation. Even the conversation yesterday we had was really powerful and beautiful. And I feel like when you're in the struggle and when you're organizing and when you're like a busy activist or whatever, you kind of forget to take the time to sit down and talk about it and have these conversations. And I just want to let you know that I come out feeling, again, like recentered and refocused, and just as a member of my nations, but also an organizer with the Red Nation, I just offer my utmost solidarity always. So thank you, Aloha.
We want to see you in the Congress, Indigenous Congress in El Salvador.
Yeah, just a final remarks about the struggles of indigenous peoples continues. And I describe it as ongoing war. And in our quest for sovereignty, self-determination. But the final thing I just will remark upon is, we've been really castigated as, I suppose, as terrorists when we insist on sovereignty, self-determination. But I do also want to remark upon political prisoners. A political prisoner and the refusal of the United States of America to release him. So that struggle for his release is ongoing. And we really, I think, need to, again, understand him as as a human rights defenders and as a political prisoners, and that the United States release them from prison.
Yeah, I
Oh.
want to piggyback on that. Because Red Nation is doing a lot of work around helping. Right now, there's the Walk to Justice for Leonard Peltier that is being organized by American Indian Movement members across the nation. Right now, they're making their way to Washington, D.C., and they'll be there by November 14th. But the Red Nation has been a big supporter of this because Leonard Peltier really represents the project of Indigenous liberation. And we see the entire project, Leonard's locked up and tied up, and so that means so are we. And when Leonard Peltier is free, that will be like the signal that's going to go down. And I think that's why they keep him in prison. That's why they keep him locked up, because ultimately he represents an Indigenous future and the future of decolonization. So yeah, support the walk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.